Welcome to Be Less Stupid. I'm your host, Jon Hotchkiss. I'm here in downtown Los Angeles. As you can see behind me, they're setting up for a climate change rally. Although the reason I'm here today is to figure out, well, why do some people show up to protest? And why are so many people too lazy to get off their asses?
I say Trump, you say jump. I say Trump, you say jump. I say Trump, you say jump. 2, 4, 6 sucks. This one doesn't rhyme.
I've been to more than 25 protests the last 3 years. Most had something to do with getting rid of Donald Trump, which I guess explains why none of the women at any of the protests burned their bra. Anyway, of all the rallies, a rare 2 or 3 had crowds of, say, 100,000 people or more. That was very rare.
Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Donald Trump has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Donald Trump has got to go!
Most of the anti-Trump events have drawn, quite frankly, just a few hundred people. A few have also drawn just a few dozen, and a couple of them drew several thousand. Last month, right here, there was a youth climate strike with Greta Thunberg, Time Magazine's Person of the Year. And look, a few thousand people showed up. 4 weeks later, though, same spot, same cause, 80% fewer people. Look, did the climate suddenly get better? I don't think so. Look, 5 weeks in a row, this group held rallies to demand Trump-Pence out now. At their first event, maybe 75 people showed up, give or take. Then, the group held 5 more events over the course of 5 weeks. Nearly all of those people that attended were just actual members of their group. They just weren't able to draw a crowd from the people here in Los Angeles. And look, this isn't an isolated example. There were 2 anti-Trump events in front of this federal building here in Los Angeles. Just a couple of hundred people showed up both times. Across the United States in general, we've seen just modest crowd sizes at events staged by liberals or Democrats. Look, yes, the first Women's March brought out a staggering number of people, and that was fantastic. The following year, though, there was a 25% drop-off, and this year, 80% fewer people. Women's marches in Chicago and New York saw similar drops in crowd size over the same years. So, my questions are, well, first, what was different about the first Women's March? And why, just 2 years later, were there 80% fewer people? And look, given how angry the anti-Trump side is on social media, why haven't we seen a commensurate turnout at protests in real life?
That they won't honor the results of any election that they lose? They're threatening civil war.
People who study this stuff have a couple of hypotheses. 1, unlike the rest of the world, America's youth just don't have a shared culture or history of mass demonstration. The worst thing that any of them have ever had to deal with is not enough cat videos on Instagram. I mean, seriously, think about it. The last time an enormous number of committed Americans marched in the streets was to protest Vietnam.
While many protesters stridently and at times violently demonstrated their opposition to the war, other young people...
And as the House prepares to vote to impeach Trump, is the existential threat to our nation's health and safety any less today? My guess is that 50% of Americans think the threat is actually worse. So what happened? Why do people who think it was important to come out and demand change for, say, the first Women's March decide that just one day of protest is enough? It's as if they're thinking to themselves, right? Yup, I was there. I chanted, and from this day forward, women will no longer have to give blowjobs to advance their careers. Problem solved. Look, why do some causes ignite a spark to activism that is ultimately extinguished like a birthday candle. Instead, why isn't that spark ignited into a raging inferno? Look, there are scientists who study human behavior, how crowds react, and political protests. And they have a couple of hypotheses. It's possible that going to a protest is like getting a vaccine, after which you think, yup, I got my shot. Climate change can no longer happen. I made a clever sign. It's also possible that the effect of going to a protest is that somehow it makes you less angry about the thing that you're out there protesting. You showed up to demand that Trump should be impeached, and you left thinking to yourself, hey, you know what? Those Mexican kids? Yeah, I think they might be rapists. It's also possible that showing up at a protest makes you recognize the enormity of the problem that you're demonstrating against. And then you realize that, well, like Charlie Sheen's cocaine habit, solving it is going to be impossible. So you give up, right? It'd be like if you went to a climate change rally and on the way home you said to yourself, okay, look, if it gets hotter, you know what? We'll just lower the air conditioner. Or maybe we'll put up some kind of really big awning.
There is nothing more important than the environment. We do not have another place to live and work, job, like school. All of that kind of takes a backseat if you're not even going to be alive in so many decades, you know.
Here now, the top 5 things that a protest organizer can do to keep people engaged, to keep them coming out, to protest and demonstrate in the streets, and to keep them coming back. For more, let's go to our correspondent. Oh, it's apparently me, Jon Hotchkiss, who's live in Los Angeles.
The first thing that people want to do is, well, they want to express that they have a grievance. There's something that's going on in the world or in their neighborhood or in their community, and it goes against their values or against their morals.
That is absolutely right, John. The other kind of protest is one where you're going to demonstrate for or against something that doesn't specifically affect you. According to those scientists that I mentioned earlier, people are more passionate about stuff that affects them personally than stuff that does not. So if you want to get a lot of people to come out to your protest, it'll help if it's for a cause that will personally affect the people you're asking to come demonstrate.
Another thing that might motivate a person to come out to a protest is if they are experiencing what they call in science relative deprivation. The point is that you feel like there are people in your area, your neighborhood, your community who are being treated differently than you. More often than not, you think that somebody else is getting something that you think that you should also get. And so you come out to protest that.
Right. If people feel that some group is being given something that they are not getting, that upsets them greatly. It's one of the reasons that Donald Trump supporters keep coming back to his rallies. They feel that there is a line for government services and that illegal immigrants are cutting the line and getting benefits meant for them.
Another reason that people might come out is not because they're worried about unfair outcomes, as in the situation with relative deprivation. They're more concerned about, are the people who are making decisions making them fairly? Is there corruption going on at the level at which policies are being implemented?
I gotta tell you, this guy's good. Now look, in this situation, people who think that there's corruption going on among the decision makers, they might come out to protest. Think the protests during the Vietnam War. Many people were convinced that they were being lied to by our leaders who were saying that America could win that war.
Donald Trump is going to jail. This one doesn't rhyme. Donald Trump is going to jail. This one doesn't rhyme.
We're still doing a thing here, buddy.
Donald Trump is going to jail. This one doesn't rhyme.
Hello?
Another motivating factor that will get people to come out and protest is if they feel like their contribution to the protest will actually have some effect on the outcome of the thing that they're protesting for or against.
Right. In order to sustain people's interest in a protest movement, people want to feel like their energy and commitment isn't being wasted. Take, for example, the protests and demonstrations around the Montgomery bus boycott and the battle to desegregate public transportation. people back then rightly felt that a sustained effort on their part would have a positive effect. And it did.
With understanding, goodwill, and Christian love, we can integrate the buses, Montgomery, with no difficulty. I want Montgomery to prove to the world that we will refuse to hit back.
Certainly none of the big civil rights changes that we've had, suffrage, women's rights, there's, a million examples of how protest has worked and given us all the freedoms that we have today. So,
one of the most important things that will determine whether or not people will show up at your protest is if they identify with you. For example, let's say they've seen similar protests on TV or on the web previously. Can they imagine themselves standing where you are and doing the kinds of things that you are doing?
Right. Can people identify with the protesters? That is perhaps the most crucial thing that will determine the success of your movement. For example, remember Occupy Wall Street, right? People in those ridiculous Guy Fawkes masks and people sleeping outside on mattresses in the streets, right? One reason that those protests may have had little lasting effect on how Wall Street does business is that people at home could not identify with people hiding behind those silly masks. They couldn't see themselves doing what those protesters were doing. Look, on the other hand, think about the Women's March. They made those pink hats. Women saw them in advance of the first event. They thought to themselves, yes, a pink hat! I could wear that. And then they made them and they bought them because they were able to imagine themselves protesting, and when they did, they imagined lots of other women wearing the same hat. And look, here's one more example. Here is some footage from the first Refuse Fascism rally here in Los Angeles.
It is up to us to get the millions who hate Trump in this fascist America.
And now here the next four.
Y ahora se convirtió en alguien que en vez de sentir.
Look at the people in the group. They're wearing t-shirts that remind you of revolutionaries. The people in charge are very, very young. Many have, quite frankly, fluorescent colored hair. It is my opinion that events like these haven't been more effective at drawing a crowd because, well, here in image-conscious Los Angeles, the people who've seen the events on TV and on the web have not identified with the people that they see on the screens. They can't imagine themselves among that crowd of protesters. And look, those aren't the only reasons people will join a protest. Look, here's a whole bunch more. So to sum up,
the application is that we're supposed to be here once a month, and it's not a monthly change. Anything that we can do, any sort of difference, is going to take a lot of time. So I think people are daunted by the prospect of taking a long time to get the change to happen.
if you want to see more people out at your demonstration, number one, make sure that people watching can identify with you. Number two, make it about an issue that is very personal to the people you're asking to come demonstrate. It'll also help if your issue involves corrupt politicians making unfair, unreasonable, or criminal decisions. You also want to give the impression that your protesting will at the very least lead to some kind of positive result. And finally, it'll really help your protest if it's on a nice day, if the participants feel safe and it's conveniently located. Thanks everyone for watching. You can support my work by going to our website and ordering a Be Less Stupid t-shirt. They make lovely holiday gifts. And please, tell your friends and share these videos. It is absolutely incredibly important for the number of subscribers on this channel to increase in order to prevent YouTube from marginalizing my work and making it harder and harder for you to find these videos. Again, I say thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. For Be Less Stupid, I'm the host, Jon Hotchkiss.